"There are peculiars all over the world," she said, "though our numbers are much diminished from what they once were. Those who remain live in hiding, as we do." She lapsed into a soft, regretful voice. "There was a time when we could mix openly with common folk. In some corners of the world we were regarded as shamans and mystics, consulted in times of trouble. A few cultures have retained this harmonious relationship with our people, though only in places where both modernity and the major religions have failed to gain a foothold, such as the black magic island of Ambrim and the New Hebrides. But the larger world turned against us long ago. The Muslims drove us out. The Christians burned us as witches. Even the pagans of Wales and Ireland eventually decided that we were all malevolent fairies and shape-shifting ghosts. Can you imagine, in a world so afraid of otherness, why this would be a danger to all peculiar kind?" Hi, I'm Alexa Brooks, and I'm doing a little book talk on Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom Riggs. Now, I stumbled across this when I was just perusing through Barnes & Noble, and I was positively terrified because of this super creepy picture on the front cover. Upon opening up the flap, I learned that these pictures are real, and being extremely gullible and easily creeped out, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't read this book, it'll give me nightmares. So I made a rule that I could not read it before bed, alone. One of my roommates had to be present, or I had to go to the library and purposely sit where there was a lot of noise because I got so easily creeped out. However, even though this book terrifies me, I was positively intrigued by it. I had never been so excited to read a book. I was just drawn in by these like creepy images and how Ransom Riggs seamlessly laces together these vintage true real photographs with fiction, and it's a very cool product that he makes, and I think that all of you would really enjoy it because it gives you a sense of visual, so you can actually imagine the characters that he's talking about, and it's just very cool and very different. So while this could just be a typical paranormal horror story, I also seem to think that there's something else going on in this that may have to do with the Holocaust. Now, it's probably just because I recently read Yann Martel's Beatrice and Virgil, but do I recommend reading this first and then reading this? Because I think it will give you an entirely different reading experience, because in this book it kind of has to do with the Holocaust, but in a very strange, absurd way, and it discusses those. And then in Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, there's a strange sense of who the monsters are, because we have a hard time identifying who the monster is. There's super creepy monsters like this, which this is just a drawing that Jacob has someone draw based on what he thinks that he has seen and no one believes him. Or there's these other monsters in this story called hollow gas, and that kind of sounds like Holocaust to me, which just might be the first clue, but there's a lot of talk about the war and how it traumatized Jacob, this young boy's grandfather, and how everyone thought that his grandpa was crazy because he was seeing things and he was imagining things, or was he actually seeing them? And Jacob explores this. His therapist encourages him to go on this trip to Wales, which ironically is where I wanted to study abroad, and I'm fairly certain that I do not want to go there because it's kind of creepy. But he goes there, and he goes to this place that his grandpa described to him on his deathbed right when he died. Actually, it wasn't a deathbed. It's a really strange story, but I won't blow the mystery for you, how his grandpa dies, because that's kind of what the whole book is kind of figuring out. And to discover if these monsters are real, who these people were, was his grandpa living a lie? His dad is a very logical person, and his mom's a very logical person, and they're telling Jacob, you need to just get with the real world, and they wouldn't have never, ever, ever allowed him to go on this trip except for with the aid of Jacob's psychiatrist, Dr. Golan, who is like, he needs closure, he needs to go there, see it for himself. And so there's this dichotomy between wanting to join the real world and then exploring the imaginary that we oftentimes just forbid from our minds because we have to live the logical life. And Jacob explores this and walks this line very closely, but the entire book is him trying to figure out whether he's imagining things or whether this is real, and what it means if it's real, and which world does he want to be a part of. It's really very interesting, and it also has to deal with otherness. Now, growing up, I've always been kind of the weird girl. I'm kind of socially awkward, so I've always been the other. And in this book, so is Jacob, and then so are all of these peculiar children that he's meeting. But in the with all the other peculiar children, they're not peculiar. They're just children with each other, and it just kind of explores otherness. Is it such a bad thing to be different? This is what Jacob has to say about how he believes in these extraordinary things. His grandpa had just shown him the pictures that I previewed in this video and said that they're real. And he says, "I believe you," I said. And I really did believe him, for a few years at least. Though mostly because I wanted to, like other kids my age wanted to believe in Santa Claus. We cling to our fairy tales until the price for believing them becomes too high. Which for me was the day in 2nd grade when Robbie Jensen pantsed me at lunch in front of a table of girls and announced that I believed in fairies. In our real world, we are trying to convince ourselves that we have to believe in this logic thing and these plans because that's what's successful, and we have to live in the real world. But what is reality? These imaginary things, these photographs, these peculiar things, we're inexplicably drawn to them for some reason because we're so sick of our ordinary lives that we're just craving for something extraordinary, something out of the ordinary, because we're so bored with our daily monotonous lives. Thanks for watching, and happy reading! But anyway, my camera's filming all of this, so I'm gonna go now. Go to bed, but you should do soon. Okay. Okay. Maybe I should give a summary first. What am I gonna say about the imaginary?